Underpainting, underpainting. Go and Google underpainting, 'cause I'm not going to explain it every time. And then we paint the fleshy flesh, the gooey, yummy, fleshy flesh. Every time the fleshy flesh, we paint the yummy, fleshy flesh. Because that's sort of the focus of the piece, isn't it? It's a thing with a face, and the face is right in the middle, so it makes sense that you paint the face first. And then you highlight the face. And then you highlight the face some more. And then you highlight the face some more until it's all highlightened. I usually use a burnt umber and a crimson red and a bit of yellow ochre blended together to make kind of a nice brown, a nice pooey brown colour. And then you throw some white in there and it makes it all fleshy and nice, which is good. And then you can see the highlights working their magic already just on the tops of the brows and the ears and such. It's already taking shape, giving nice form to the skin and face and shit. And then pink, because, you know, the extremities, the fingers and toes, if they were in the picture, and then the cheeks and the nose. See, I made it rhyme. A pink, just red added to that flesh concoction. With a bit of white to make it not just like a bright, vibrant pink, but, you know, a toned down, fleshy pink. And then you highlight it by adding a bit more white to that, a little bit more of the flesh, so it blends in, especially with the fingers, because you don't want it to be fleshy colour and then pink. You want to sort of blend that pink into the flesh. So you highlight it with the, or you mix the highlighted version of it with the flesh colour itself. And then a slightly bigger brush for some broader strokes of a more pinky pink for the dress. Not spending as much time sort of rendering the material or anything, just a pink mid-tone, a little bit of darker pink for some shadow, and then a lighter pink for some highlights. Because you don't really need to focus on the dress too much. The important parts are the more characterful parts, like the face and the hands and such. So you just slop in some paint on the dress, a bit of pink for the gums, and then the balls and the bones, those eye bulbs and the teeth bones. Always one of the funnest parts to paint, especially because you just have the gaping black maw and those vacant holes where her eyes are supposed to be as you paint around them. And then when you paint them in, these bright white things shining out. I say white. It's actually a raw umber and a white to make like a dull greyish brown kind of colour that I use and then highlight up with white. And pretty much the same thing for the bandages, band-aids and plasters and bandages, because she's a rough and ready, attack you in the face with an axe kind of girl. She gets in fights. So she's got a missing tooth, cut up lips, and scratches and bumps and bruises on her arms. So add in the band-aids just to add a bit more character to her, yeah, and green hair. And that's that. And I find it's usually best to paint hair in like clumps. So rather than try to paint every strand, it's a good idea to paint like broader strokes. Similarly to how we did the material on her dress. As you can see, I do the more you highlight, the more refined you get with thinner lines, pulling out just, you know, slightly more individual strands almost, but still keep them somewhat clumped together to give the impression of bunches of hair, as opposed to painting every single individual strand, which is not only a pain in the arse, it can also look terrible because of the difference in mark making. I find most solid paintings have consistency in their mark making. So if you use sort of one or two types of paint stroke in your painting overall, it sort of fits together nicer. But then if you have like fat strokes here and tiny thin strokes there and all this kind of thing all over the place, it can look a little bit messy and shit. Yellow for the details and the highlights in the hair made those pop. And that's just like a green with a little bit of yellow and brown in it, and then highlighted with white. Just on those tippy tops, just on the fine top edges of the hair, just to make it shine. And then some more broad, quickly put in details on the dress, with a little bit of highlighting, just to make those pop just a little bit. Not being too careful with those, just throwing them in. Especially since we'll be putting in a few sort of outlines and things here and there later, so these bits can be fairly messy. You don't need to be precious with them. Brown for the handle of the axe. Wow, that's amazing. It's actually what we do with the head of the axe. The collective we, that is I, do with the head of the axe is a trick I learned from copying artists that are far better than I am, is to use blue rather than grey for metals, especially on weapons and things, because grey can look very stone-like, I find, whereas if you throw some blue, it's a grey blue, it's mixed as a grey with some blue in there. I usually use a cobalt blue, but it gives just that blue gives just a bit of tinge and makes it just slightly more metallic, especially if you've got a painting that has stone in it as well as metal. The stone could be more grey, the metal could be more blue, so it does have it differentiates it slightly. And then you use the highlighting of the blue of the axe to add in some scratches and bumps and things. And then light blue, and that's a trick I learned from graffiti actually, is rather than paint the entire thing the background colour and then paint the picture on top of that, is you paint the picture first and then you paint the background around the picture, which seems almost backwards, and it kind of is. But I like the texture it gives. So you're sort of painting over some of the outlines and leaving some of the outlines, and it gives it a nice sort of like thick, gloopy background texture. And the outlines and shadows, adding those in, just detail, really adding in some contrast, some shadows that are needed here and there, with a very, very, very dark red, mostly black with a bit of red in there to match the underpainted sort of blackish red ink and such, and adding in all those details, some hairs, the pupils on the eyes, just tidying things up a bit. And then the final white highlight light spots, hot spot highlights on the shiny bits on the eyes, on the nose, it's really effective, and on the cheek. And then blood, delicious, yummy fucking blood for the blood goddess!